This place is more than just a museum. Yes, there's amazing art inside, but there's also the serene gardens outside, the inspiring architecture, the connection to France, the Instagrammable spots, cafes, a Michelin star restaurant, as well as other events taking place at the Louvre. Whether you live in the UAE or are a tourist trying to decide if it's worth adding to your itinerary, this is a story you will not want to skip. So, Louvre Abu Dhabi. Imagine opening a museum in the desert, but making it look like it landed from space. At least that's what I first thought when I saw it. And it turns out my space landing theory isn't too far off because the building was designed by a Pritzker Prize-winning architect, Jean Nouvel, who envisioned a museum city in the sea, complete with Arab Medina vibes under a futuristic dome that lets in a magical rain of light. But more on that in a minute. The museum opened in November 2017, but the story actually starts much earlier with an intergovernmental agreement between France and the UAE signed back in 2007. What was the deal? Abu Dhabi would get the right to use the prestigious Louvre name for 30 years and artworks on loan from French institutions, including, yes, from the Louvre Museum in Paris. And in return, France would help build a world-class museum from the ground up. Now, if you're wondering, is this the only Louvre outside of France? Yes, it is. There are no other such projects anywhere else in the world. However, as you go in, you'll realize that the galleries don't just showcase French art or even just Middle Eastern art. Rather, you will find pieces from ancient Egypt next to works from Renaissance Italy, classical China, Islamic empires, as well as contemporary Europe, which are actually deliberately curated that way to show how humanity connects through culture. The exhibitions are global, stretching across civilizations, continents, centuries, and even religions. Actually, you will find depictions from multiple faiths, including sacred books like the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah. Another beautiful feature you will notice is a series of poetic and philosophical quotes painted on the windows that you will see as you walk through the different sections. And sometimes they're placed in spots where there's a really nice view outside the window, which makes for a perfect picture. And the architecture, it's not just for show. The huge 8-ton dome keeps the area beneath it cooler while casting these beautiful patterns of light and shadow all day long. It kind of floats above these buildings underneath it like a spaceship. And speaking of those buildings, you get a better idea of the space once you step out from the galleries and under the dome. Some of the buildings are the actual galleries, and then some of them are other spaces, like there's a kids museum with a space theme, which you can go into even as an adult, of course. It's 2 stories and it's a quick visit. There's also an auditorium, which we will get to in a moment. There's cafes and restaurants, and at least one of them, I think, is some sort of office space for the people who work there. But in between the buildings, there's sculptures, there's lights that you'll see more clearly in the evening hours, which, by the way, gorgeous. Since I've visited multiple times, I got to go at different times of day, including at sunset, midday, as well as during the night. And honestly, I don't know which is better. It's serene all around. But Other than all this, there's also turtles in some of the pools down there. I actually didn't notice it till like my third visit. You could also hire a kayak or an electric catamaran, which is small and fits two people, but it's a great way to experience this area from the water, POV. What else is under the dome? There is an Instagram photo spot, which I am not ashamed to admit I participated in. This is me in the queue, and this is my little walk. There's even a spotlight where you're supposed to stand. Your photographer should stand right across this little runway. All right, now on to the extra stuff, the events that take place here. One of the events I went to was a film screening during the Cannes Film Festival, and this is where that auditorium I mentioned earlier comes into play. It's not your typical cinema experience, but they had popcorn and drinks, and the movie was excellent, so I fully recommend it if you get the chance. On the art side, other than the permanent exhibition, there are also temporary exhibitions. The last one I went to was called Kings and Queens of Africa, Forms and Figures of Power, and it was spectacular. I'm so glad I went. The pieces featured were brought from another French museum, Musée du Quai Branly, Jacques Chirac. The most interesting part was this short film right at the beginning, where they showed how the continent of Africa was perceived throughout the centuries. Obviously, as we now know, much smaller than it physically really is. But the focus here is on the rulers, both current and past, and so many of the portraits, objects, traditions, and rituals are showcased. And then at the end, there's an interactive cartoon slash video games corner, which I assume is for kids. The museum shop, by the way, which is also, as in any museum, at the end, is so good. I always find something to buy there because the pieces are so well made and often very original. They make for wonderful souvenirs as well as gifts. Last but not least, I absolutely must mention the cafes. There's also a Michelin star restaurant inside, but I only visited the cafe. I mean, look at these views. It's a beautiful spot to get some rest in between the galleries and enjoy these calming vibes. There are also some pop-up shops outside. These change from time to time. Again, the views here as well are absolutely incredible, which is obviously due to the location. Speaking of which, all of this sits on Saadiyat Island, a still developing cultural district that's already home to the Louvre, Abrahamic Family House, Team Lab Phenomena, and eventually will host the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi, the Zayed National Museum, and several other cultural institutions that are currently being built. I am so looking forward to seeing those open as well. And if you want to come along, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching and see you on our next adventure.